company, software engineering stuff. Um, and then I started working at Facebook full time soon after I graduated in like the beginning of 2020. I quit that job earlier this year, and now I'm doing like freelance software engineering work, which isn't too common. But yeah, I do like a lot of like data visualization, web tech engineering stuff right now. In the past, like when I was at Facebook, I did like Oculus, virtual reality headsets, that sort of stuff. But right now, I'm like freelance and working on my own.
Awesome. How about you, Harriet?
Hi guys. So I also graduated at the end of 2019. I majored in human computer interaction with the cognitive science department with a minor in computer science. So as I was interning a couple places here and there, and then as my kind of like education concluded, I would transition from doing CS to product design. So as I was interning at American Express, I made the choice to jump to product design full time. And then now I'm working in a pretty cool startup in Los Angeles called Route. So pretty nice to see all of you.
Awesome. And how about you, Stanley?
Hey guys, so I also graduated in 2019, and I was a computer science major under the CSE department. Did several internships. I think the most notable one is probably Cisco Systems, if you guys have heard of it. First job right out of college was SDE, software development engineer at Amazon, and now I'm currently working as an SDE, but at Discovery.
I see. And that's the Discovery Channel, right?
Yes, not the Discover credit card. People get those two confused.
I see. That's so awesome. Okay. Y'all are had interesting roles in your life, and I bet these students today will have tons of questions. So this is for how Q&A will work is that you submit a question on the chat, and I'll read it to our panelists, and they can answer. And for the panelists, feel free to take turns answering a question or just pass it over to your other panelist members. But yeah, but if there is no questions for now, we do have a set of preset questions to kind of like get the vibe going. One thing I do want to mention is that Stanley was one of our initial members for TrineHacks back when we were still planning it. So that's a bit of an acknowledgement. So thank you, Stanley. And hopefully you're happy to see it finally happen after 3 years.
Yeah, great to see that has actually come to fruition.
Finally, yeah. Okay, so one of our questions is that a typical job in the technical industry is often seen as like sitting down on the desk and programming all day. Is this true? What do you do in your day-to-day job? It could be either your current work or your previous positions. And I guess we can go from the start. So Kyle, you want to start?
Yeah. So yeah, not everything in the job will be related to coding. You will probably have to do like a bunch of meetings with other engineers, other like UI designers to see like some of the work and some of the code that you'll be anticipating for the next couple of weeks. You'll also be doing some presentations. Like when I entered at IBM, we actually took a week to go to New York to meet with like other IBM interns to kind of present our project. So yeah, not everything will be coding. I think other panelists can like jump around and say like some of the other stuff they've done other than meetings and coding. But yeah, mostly will be meetings, coding, and then some kind of like company activities, so like going to the park, going bowling, stuff like that.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate. Like, it's definitely not coding all the time, every day. A lot of meetings, whether that be like check-ins with other technical teams to figure out like, oh, like we're thinking of building this. Have you built something similar? Do you have like another, idea of how to like approach it? A lot of technical discussions of like different approaches that you could take when solving a problem, and like whether you want to like take the time and do it the right way, or if you just want like quick and easy, like get something out of the way done. And also just like planning in general, like when you want to like, when you want to like, quote unquote, like ship or deploy your new features, or when you want to like, when you think you can like get plans done. So it's a lot of like, detailed like small things like that, like, big old corporate job stuff. I would say now that I'm like a freelancer, like I spend a lot more time coding because that's like what I'm usually hired for. Like I'm not hired to like plan things out. People are just like, oh yeah, like we want you to, build this. So I spend more of my time, building that. But for the most part, and like most, at least in my experience, in like most big tech places, it's been like, maybe like even down to like 20-30% coding. The rest is like kind of like planning or whatever else or other stuff in that area, if that makes sense.
I see. Harriet?
Yeah, I would say that's absolutely true. Even though my position currently, I don't need to code on a daily basis, or even regularly at all. From what I've observed, that people coming into the same company as I did around the same time, a lot of times it's kind of like checking with your supervisors, your managers, and your like more senior coworkers on like what is on the roadmap, how do we plan to like implement this, and like what team are going to be working on specific features, like what's your strength. And then even just general like one-on-one like career development meetings with your mentor, things like that, or sometimes just like sitting down together, like shuffling like Jira tickets and checking like, oh, who's going to take this part of the work, who's going to take that part of the work. So it's not just like, all right, you're here and then you do this, so like just do it. Like it's not just like that. So it's definitely collaborative and like very personalized to like what you're good at. And then usually companies will make it also their mission to make sure you're having a good time, you're getting the right resources, things like that. Yeah.
I see. So you're not just like completely left off to your work. You have a lot of guidance, right?
Yes.
I see. And how about you, Stanley?
Yeah, so I guess like to follow up on that, especially when you are, I guess, either going for an internship or like a new grad position, there's a lot of guidance and like mentoring along the path. So that way you're not like just doing something by yourself. You're not stuck. If you ever have questions, people usually try to help you out when possible. And I guess to go back to the original question of like the day-to-day basis, a lot of it is coding, but a lot of it is also related to coding, but not coding itself. So for example, if you're writing some piece of software that needs to be deployed, you probably need to do a lot of like testing, for example, or maybe you need to check in with another team and ask them for, like specific user requirements. And you might have other meetings that aren't even coding related. So for example, design meetings or one-on-ones with your manager or your mentor. Those happen pretty often depending on the company. And as Kyle mentioned, there are a lot of other things that happen like outside of just, coding. Like you can have team events. Sometimes I'm pretty sure a lot of companies usually have like some sort of like happy hour gathering on Fridays. And it's a good way to get to know your coworkers like outside of just like a traditional work environment where everyone's talking about coding or something that's related to computers, and you can talk about their daily life or even like get to hang out with them outside of their work environment.
I see. Very interesting. Okay, so a lot of you are in very technical roles, of course, in the tech industry. And so I was wondering, did you all have CS in your mind throughout college, or did you switch over from a different major, or were you from a completely non-related CS major and you just stumbled upon the tech industry? Like, how did you come about to your career, basically?
Yeah, I think for me, I really had CS in my mind ever since like the beginning of high school. Like I think I got my interest from coding when I took a video game design class back in like my freshman year of high school, and there was like a section of the class that's dedicated to coding, and I always found that like pretty interesting. Like you have like a lot of control over how like the characters move and like how different interactions work, and I just found that like pretty captivating to me. I also took AP-CSP back in my senior year of high school, and it also kind of like, I guess, confirmed to me like this is the career that I want to take. So ever since then, I've mostly focused on doing some CS stuff, got involved with CS for Each, did some CS tutoring, and did some internships, and now I'm here still doing CS.
Yeah, for me, it was I so when I was like trying to choose a major in high school, trying to go into college, like I took a physics class. So I really like engineering, and like I always liked computers. So I thought like computer engineering would be like, put the words together. But computer engineering is kind of like, when I got to college, I realized like half of it is like software based, like, computer science, mathy, that sort of stuff. And the other half is like electrical engineering based. And that's more like traditional engineering, physics, electricity, all that stuff. I always struggled way more with the electrical engineering side than with like the computer science side. I didn't take my first programming class until like my first year at college. And I think like when I took that, I just kind of like realized like, oh, like I really like computers and I really like what's going on here. And I like kind of like the, the puzzle aspect of it and everything. So like just throughout college, I always just like liked the computer science side way more. And then when I found out more about like, all the different roles in the tech industry, like something that I never really thought of or knew about before, once I figured out like, oh, like software engineering is a thing and people get to work on this stuff and all these giant companies can hire people based on doing this kind of work. I just found that like more and more exciting. I just got more into it, and that's the side that I ended up taking more.
I see. Very interesting. Harriet, you graduated with cog sci, right?
Mhm.
I see. How was your journey from that degree to where you are now?
I initially, when I started college, my goal was always just to get a CS degree. I didn't really look into that much of like other like options for me. But then at the same time, I always knew that even though I was really good at a lot of CS classes I took, I had other interesting like psychology and then like design, that kind of things. But I never really like thought that could be like a career option for me. It was more like, oh, this will be my like side thing. Like, I could be a programmer with like this specialty that would make me really good at working with designers. I never thought, at least early on, I would be a designer. It just really just came down to like what I really wanted to do for the rest of my life. Like obviously I had things that I was good at in CS, but there's always kind of like the kind of like a voice in the back of my head that says, oh, if I don't do this now, I'll never be able to do it. Like it's my choice. I want to be happy for the next 30 years of my career instead of like like the first 10 years, it's like good to flex that like, oh, I'm an engineer or like things like that. So it was kind of just like, became a natural choice for me to like transition out of CS to like something that I, know really well. And then I became a full-time designer. And then now the good thing is that I can flex that I'm a designer who knows how to code. So it just kind of like all my education just became like a huge asset to me in like more ways than I thought it could be. So it's a pretty smooth journey for me, kind of. But yeah, it definitely took a lot of courage and a lot of like classes that prepared me for like all sorts of possibilities when I was still in college, at least. Yeah.
I see. Very interesting. Stanley?
So for me, I guess my initial interest in computer science started back in high school. Initially, I wanted to go into like a more engineering path. So I think like aerospace engineering was like my interest. But then I took an AP computer science course in my high school, and I guess it kind of stood out to me as being something different. So it wasn't just, root memorization and like, like regurgitating the facts that you've learned, but rather like learning how to solve problems and think like outside the box. And I guess throughout college, this kind of was reinforced through the classes that I took. And if anything, it like really broadened my perspective on what like computer science can do. Like it's not just limited to coding. Like for example, you can go into UI UX, project management, data science, machine learning, and a bunch of different like subfields that pretty much every industry uses nowadays. So even if you don't want to be stuck in a traditional, like software engineering role, you can definitely use that computer science skill to work in just about any field that you want.
I see. Very interesting. So a lot of our participants are just barely coming into college. I think the oldest participant audience we have is like graduating seniors from high school. And a lot of them may be a bit unsure about what to study in college, and guessing that they're in Shrine Hacks right now, they may have an interest in CS. But for our panelists who were in that stage of uncertainty, what advice would you give to these students about building a path forward in college? What are some things that help you through? What are some resources that really help you build that path to where you are now? And any advice you can give to our students?
Yeah, so I don't have the full like information on like the number of resources that are available, but there are definitely resources if you're going to some college you're choosing, not always UCSD. They will typically have like a college and career advising center. Here in UCSD, we have one even specifically for the individual colleges. So just in case you don't know, UCSD has like 6 separate colleges. And so these advising centers are much more accessible since you only have to since they only have to deal with like hundreds of students versus like the entire campus. So yeah, so whatever college you go to, take advantage of the career and college and career advising, and just like I don't know, try a few different things. Probably if you like CS, probably see if you could find like an intro to CS course. If not, there's typically a more beginner-friendly approach to something similar to like APCSP. There's probably some equivalent college course for that. And if you like that, you could definitely start pursuing CS. But other than that, there are definitely a bunch of classes open to when you start college that you can try out, see which one you like, and then see if you can pursue a career from that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I think definitely when you start college, you have a lot of time and quarters and classes to take like other classes or in other areas that you might be interested in. So like, intro to CS courses, if you're able to take that, if you're interested in like computer science specifically, or like even other like intro to like other engineering or STEM sort of classes, you definitely have the time to kind of explore and like kind of like see what you would like. I'd also say that if you're interested in like computer science specifically, there's a lot of resources out there that you can like, on the online, you could find online that like would kind of, you could try out yourself and like maybe build a little project for yourself, see if you kind of like that sort of thing. For example, like, I remember like when I like first started with college and all that and tried to see if I like, like programming or whatever else, I would like try to find these like Python courses online to see if I would like, oh, maybe I could try to learn something or build something or whatever. And most of those courses were like kind of boring. They're like, oh, a little script that does something that I don't really care about. And it was just more about like, copy and pasting stuff to see if it worked. But when I started doing stuff like, oh, build a Discord bot that like whenever something happens, it'll message me to give me an update, or a Discord bot that will like, add all my friends to do, some weird thing, or like when you build like a project like that, that's like a little bit more exciting and a little bit more with like, that gets your friends involved or gets you involved in like a sport or a video game or something that you like a lot. I found that to be a lot more helpful, and that got me way more excited and wanted me to, and like that kind of like when I went down that road, I was like, okay, yeah, this is what I really like. Computer science is cool, and trying to find tutorials and programming stuff about something that I like is way easier than like following some normal like random programming tutorial that I found online. So I found that to be helpful when I was like trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah, I would definitely say like if you're still in high school, if your school offers AP computer science, that's great. If not, like that's okay. I went to school in China, so like we didn't have like AP computer science. I didn't know that's a thing you can do, like something you can study before college at all. But I was able to go to a summer program at Stanford, and then I took like a CS class there, and that's how I got some credit and then some understanding of computer science. So, if you're in the SD area, there's some great community colleges around you, and then they offer like computer science or any other kind of like related engineering classes. I really strongly advise you to like look into those. And then if like timing or like money is an issue, like there's always like online communities you can find. Just get to know like what part of CS that interests you. There's like, front end, back end, web, mobile, Android and or like iOS, like there's a bunch of things. I say like definitely find your crowd, and then just get some general understanding of like what you like to do. And then once you enter college, like there's multiple pathways that can achieve what you like, where you want to be in the future. So yeah, do that. And I have a funny story. When I was attending Stanford, I got into class. I have a twin sister who went with me around the same time, and she did not get into the class, but she was able to get to she was able to go to UCLA like with just like a CS major when she was accepted, because she kind of spinned her story in the college application essay. She was like, oh, even though I didn't get into the class, I sat with my sister like throughout the summer, and then I learned so much about it. And that's kind of like how she got into like a UC school with a CS major like already like offering in hand, and I actually didn't get a CS like major like degree like offering in hand when I went to UCSD. So there's like always like pathways you can kind of follow and then just like try to explore to get to where you want to be. But like, yeah, definitely looking to like options around you.
Yeah, so kind of like adding on to that, I think when you have any sort of interest in a specific field that may not even be related to computer science, you can usually find ways in which computer science is used in that field. Like, for example, I have some friends who are really interested in like biology and like DNA, for example. And in case you didn't know, like DNA sequencing is very like strongly related to computer science. And it's like these like little tiny like fields that you wouldn't really think, oh, computer science probably has nothing to do with, you know, biology. And then you can find like little, I guess, like segments in that field that a computer science like role would definitely help out in. And on top of that, I don't think anyone mentioned, but I think a really good way to have a better like broadening of what sort of field you want to go into, if it's related to computer science, is to attend a hackathon. Like when you go to a hackathon, there's pretty much like hundreds of other students like you who like, you know, aren't sure about what they want to do. But at the same time, hackathons are a great way to get to know people, get to build things that you've never built before. Like, for example, I attended a hackathon at like USC my freshman year, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but like we ended up building like an Android app, and I've never touched Android before in my life, but I learned it on the spot. And it's a really great way of you to be exposed to new technologies, to get to know other people in the industry, and at the same time get your questions answered. So if you ever are like unsure about like what you want to do, other people have been in the same position that you are in currently, and it's a good way to get advice. And at the same time, I think a hackathon is a great way to demonstrate, I guess, like what you can build. So it's definitely something that's really useful if you're planning on, you know, applying for like internships in the future. So it shows that, you know, you have the initiative and you want to, you know, build things with computer science.
Absolutely. So yeah, if you're in a hackathon, you all are showing initiative, and I'm definitely not biased because I'm not hosting a hackathon. But yeah, so going off of what Stanley said about how CS is very adaptable. You like, for example, biology and the intersection between computer science is like, it's so weird for a person who has never really seen about it, but bioinformatics is a thing. And so that can be an encouragement for a lot of people. And so you can look out for classes that are very niche, and hopefully that will introduce you and engage you in computer science. That said, so panelists, do you have a favorite class that you took at UCSD or throughout your college career that you felt was really impactful, or you just really liked it, or it just stood out to you? If so, what was that class? What did it teach? And what was that thing that made you go like, this is the class I'll remember for life? Kyle, you want to go?
Yeah, I think for me, I have two classes in mind. One of them was CSC 127, which was the cybersecurity course. And it basically taught you how to hack stuff. So like doing like buffer overflow attacks. I don't know, like they do like a simulation where you're like hacking into like some sort of like server. And yeah, that was just like really fascinating. So I don't know if any of you guys are like into hacking stuff, you know, cybersecurity is the way to go. Another class was CSC 151B, which is the deep learning one. And I just found like the assignments like pretty fascinating. Like the last programming assignment we did was to create a machine learning model, which took like a picture, and I'll see like a picture of like some kid jumping on a trampoline, and you feed into the machine learning model, and it will output like a caption for that, a caption that literally says like kid jumping on a trampoline. I just found like that to be so fascinating to see like computers can actually like do these sorts of things. So yeah, AI and cybersecurity are definitely like the classes I'll definitely be remembering for the time being.
Yeah, I took my senior year, I take a machine learning in the arts class. It was like a combination like machine learning and arts class. And like machine learning, I knew nothing about machine learning. Like it's a very complicated like math scientific thing that like I never really got. I was never very good with like college level math anyway. So like that was just like something that like I didn't know much about. But this was like, using popular machine learning techniques and applying it to like make art. So like for example, like making a bot that like generates like recipe ideas, or like, getting the style of a certain painting or a picture and then applying it somewhere else. And like the technical aspect of like how that worked, I never really understood, but like just being able to like pick up some code or something and like copy and pasted my own thing and like try to build something out of it. So I remember I did one that was like you can pick a texture like something that was artistic, right? Like a painting or like a Starbucks drink or something. And then you would take a picture of yourself and then it would like cut out your shirt and it would like transfer that style onto your shirt to see like what you would look like if that thing was a shirt. So it was like, I did that with like a Spider-Man thing, like making like a Starbucks inspired Spider-Man suit. Just like, it was very like a creative class using technical stuff that I didn't quite understand, but like I could easily use into other stuff. That like really expanded my mind of like being like, oh yeah, maybe you don't just have to build machine learning stuff to like make money or to solve like these scientific whatever. You could also do it just to like kind of have some fun and do some like low creative stuff. So definitely that class was like the coolest like fusion thing that I still remember.
Interesting. How about
I
you,
was
Harriet?
gonna add on to that. I think I didn't take the same class, but I took another class in like the arts department. I forgot what number it was, but like that whole class is actually just like computer arts of like museum level pieces of like arts created by people that use computer science and like all the like machine learning, or whether it's like computer vision, like it's just like all arts that like later exhibited in like museums like in San Francisco, in San Diego, like in like Washington DC. So that's something that's definitely interesting, and I agree that like CS doesn't have to be like the evil overlord that's like like dictating like you're alive without you knowing it. Like that's definitely very cool. Yeah, but I guess to answer the question, my favorite class was CSE 134A. That's web service design and programming. That class was very fun. Professor, he's I'm not sure if he's still teaching, but it's like a hell of a class. It's really funny. It's hilarious. And then because my interest was always in the web part of things, that class really taught me that like no matter what the trendiest technology is, I know there's a lot of pressure, especially for like web developers. There's like the new framework to learn, the new language to learn, the new like Kubernetes like in the backend, things like that. That class taught me that no matter like what's trendy right now, a lot of the really fundamental CS principles still apply. And then it's always good to like look to like stop and take a look back at like how things have developed over time to get an understanding of like why this is popular and why this works. What are the trade-offs between using this tech and that tech. So to really just like center yourself and not panic when you don't know the latest thing, like that is okay. So that's why it's my favorite class.
And you, Stanley?
So for me, I have two classes, and I've noticed a trend. None of you guys really mentioned any of the beginners classes, but it makes sense because that's more like computer science focused. But as you progress later on through college, that's when you get into the really fun niche classes where you specialize in a specific field. And two of the classes that I really enjoyed were CSE 150, which was machine learning, and CSE 112, which was advanced software engineering. And the reasons for both classes is, first, let's start with the first one, CSE 150. So one thing that I guess like throughout my college experience, I actually gotten bored of computer science. Like I know, right? Software engineer being bored of computer science. But I didn't really find a field that was, like really special standing out to me. Like I felt like, building a website or, like building a mobile app, like everyone's already done that and it felt repetitive. But going into machine learning, I definitely feel like it's something that you can apply to everyday life. Like it's very broad, but for example, some of the projects that I did was like, let's say you were given a maze, what's the fastest way to, like traverse from point A to point B? And that's something that you can definitely use in real life. So for example, Google Maps is an example of like machine learning where you try to figure out what's the fastest path. And like, let's say there's traffic as well. And something else that I really enjoyed was like building, I guess like AI. very rudimentary AI that can be used to play games. So for example, one of them was just building two competing AIs, one that's playing black and one that's playing white for chess. And you can kind of see what moves they're making and why they're making it. And most of the time it doesn't make sense, but it's kind of cool that you can see how the human mind thinks and at the same time how a computer would think. And on to the second course that I really enjoyed was CSE 112. I would say this class is probably the most relatable class to actually working in the industry because it was very open-ended. So the entire course of the class is just one simple goal, which is build something for your client. And in our case, the professor was the client and he would pretend to, act dumb and he'd be like, oh, I want the next Facebook. But he wouldn't tell you how to build it or what users he wanted or what sort of features were needed. And you kind of had to, ask questions and you had to, make changes on the fly and be able to adapt very quickly, which is something that's very useful in the real industry.
I see. Okay. Sounds like very fun classes. I just love the mentioning of the arts. By the way, I think it's a lacking of mentioned component of CS. CS is a very artistic field, despite the idea that a lot of STEM is very metallic and gray. But there is a lot of intersection, and I think it may be an attraction for people who are in that edge between CS and non-CS. But yeah, okay. So next question is from a student. What are the languages and technologies you needed to learn to where you are now? And I guess I can add on to that. Did you learn any of these languages and technologies in school, or did you have to learn them on your own? Stanley, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I've pretty much had to learn almost everything on the fly, when I was either during my internship at Cisco or working at Amazon, or even where I'm currently at Discovery. Each one has a different tech stack. And a lot of the times, what computer science teaches you really well is how to learn rather than learning a specific, language or technology, because those things can always change. But so long as you understand the basic concepts and you're able to apply to whatever you're learning, it makes it a lot easier for you to transition between one job to another. And I guess for some of the technologies and languages I used at Cisco, I was basically a full stack developer. So I was using a mean stack and a lot of JavaScript. And honestly, I didn't really touch too much into JavaScript, but I kind of had to learn a lot of it during my first week. My manager actually let me take a few days just to get myself familiarized with the code base. And during my time at Amazon, a lot of it was done in Java, a lot of backend. And sometimes they would even use Ruby on Rails, which is a framework for developing websites. And currently at my job at Discovery, I'm working on a lot of very heavy computing performance. So we're using Golang, which is a fairly new language that was designed by Google. And it's just a lot of different technologies that you'll need to pick up. And honestly, out of everything there, I think the only one that I would remember coming out of college was Java. And that was because, it's the first language that a lot of schools tend to go over, since it's very complete and it allows you to have a really good understanding of how programming works.
I see. How about you, Harriet?
So I learned JavaScript when I was actually at a hackathon. It was actually my first hackathon ever. And then that's what really got me interested in learning more about it, since I knew that it's kind of the future of the web. And then I later on had a formal, more systematic overview of JavaScript in the class I mentioned, 134A. And then it was really relevant because as I transitioned from a CS person to a designer, there's kind of a period in between where I was doing web development and also web design around the same time. So it was just kind of the center point around how I branded myself and how I was able to get opportunities to intern or opportunities to work full time right now. So that's something that really interested me. And then, to circle back on like, hackathons, it's a really great place to like really force you to, not force you like in a bad way, but like really pushes you to like learn new things, as there are so many people around you. And then you oftentimes have like people with different skill sets and different interests come together in a team and then really like try to make something. So it's a very encouraging environment. So yeah, JavaScript and then like hackathons, please go. It's like amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna again second that that suggestion. Go to hackathons, people. How about you, Alex?
Yeah, in my day-to-day work, I mostly do JavaScript now because that's like kind of the niche that I found myself in. I do a lot of like as a freelancer, I do a lot of like data visualizations on the web, and that's just like a lot of JavaScript, just like the lay of the land that I found myself in. But like in college and all that, it was a lot of like Java and C and C++, and it was mainly those languages because those languages are really good for like learning computer science. Like when you want to learn about like memory and disks and like hard drive space and all that, like those languages are really good with that because those languages don't really hide everything. Most other languages that people use in the industry kind of abstract that away because you don't really need to know about it unless you're doing like some serious stuff. But one nice thing about that of like kind of knowing like how it works like lower down like under the hood like with those languages like that I learned in school is that like when I ever do need to go into that for whatever reason, I kind of like I'm more comfortable with it. Like I kind of know what's going on. I'm like, okay, like I've kind of seen something like this before, so I'm kind of comfortable jumping in and figuring it out. For example, one fun project that I'm doing right now is I'm hacking like a Wii Fit board. I don't know if you remember those like balance boards that like, from like Wii Fit like 2007. I'm trying to like mess with my old one just for fun. And with that, like it's surprisingly a lot of like low level C and assembly and like binary stuff and all that. And since I learned about that in college, like it was years ago, but just having that base of like knowing how to do whatever, I could go back and like, hack old stuff and, very weird tangent, but like if you ever do like working with like old school tech, like old Game Boy games or Nintendo stuff, or like reverse engineering like Wiimotes or all that and all that, it's surprisingly a lot of like low level C++, assembly, weird stuff like that. That's just like a weird little niche that I've kind of found recently that I like doing just because it's kind of fun, like old Pokemon games or whatever. But yeah, besides the point.
Absolutely. How about you, Kyle?
Yeah, for my previous internship at Facebook, I had to like learn like a bit of PHP or a certain form of PHP that Facebook only uses called Pack. And yeah, I had to learn that on the fly. But it was actually not as difficult as it may seem because as with like most programming languages, they typically have like the same components to them. Like they'll have like local variables, if conditions, loops, functions. Like all of those are probably going to be in whatever programming language you're trying to learn. So learning a new language is just trying to get familiar with the syntax and I guess some of the little niches that specific programming language has. And just like Stanley said, like when you go into computer science, it's not mostly like teaching you like this specific like tech stack. It's mostly teaching you kind of like how to learn yourself. So when you start off learning computer science, you'll mostly take like an introduction to like a specific language, so like intro to Python or intro to Java. And then from there, when you start taking like upper div courses, it's not necessarily going to be the same language that you learn from the very beginning. So like, I don't know if you're taking like, I don't know, machine learning class where it's like in Python, where you may not necessarily learn Python. I personally learned Java when I started. They'll just say like, here's your assignment. It's in Python, go. And yeah, you just kind of have to like learn as you go. So that's why it's that's why the lower div courses are kind of there, not just for you to learn a specific language, but to like learn the programming concepts in general to help you learn other programming languages much more quickly.
I see. Okay. Wow. Very. It seems that I don't want to. I don't want to criticize you, says Z, but it seems like we're really underprepared for the industry. But a lot of the industry deals with a lot of niche topics, and so college can only teach you so much within 4 years, no, maybe even 3 years, because you spend the first year just getting down with the basics. So I have a student question that is a commonly asked question about the tech industry and programming overall. how much math do you need to know to program and to be successful in the industry? So
Zero.
for so for context, high schoolers typically take integrated algebra, calculus, statistics. And so how much of that did you have to use in your day-to-day life as a programmer?
Very little.
Enough to read binary. I'm just kidding.
Stanley, Kyle?
So I would say it depends on what sort of field you go into, but I want to say, I don't want to generalize, but like, I want to say like 90% of programmers, you don't need anything beyond like algebra. If you're going to something that's a lot more math heavy, so like, for example, machine learning or like data science, then you may need, like calculus or even things beyond calculus. But in general, it's a lot more, I guess, like logic based and just like understanding like how things work together rather than like the math behind it. Unless you're one of the people who are, like designing the algorithms and whatnot. But at that point, that's you will most likely have to go to, school for a master's or a PhD before you get into the very math heavy fields.
One thing that's good to learn is statistics. There's a lot of like, trend around data science, and then there's some really good classes in UCSD. I would say AP Stats is a great way to start. Like the traditional like algebra kind of things, I guess really doesn't matter as much. So if you're interested in CS and then you're curious about like whether math really matters, if you really care about it, look into like statistics and data science.
I would say that video games surprisingly sometimes have a lot of math in them, especially like 3D VR stuff. When I got into like the VR world when I was at Oculus, it was there's some math there, but for the most part, I'd say like, yeah, most jobs, nothing too crazy. And it's also different, like the math that you do in class versus the math that you need to know for other places. It's kind of like it's not like exactly the same, right? You're not like handwriting equations and all that. It's much more of akin to like using a calculator or like learning some logic behind certain things. So it's not like directly like the math that you do in class is the math that you're going to do in like a programming class. It's usually pretty different.
And another thing I want to add on is that like in college, especially, like it's absolutely normal to have like a C or a B in math because how college is, like you're in a big classroom and sometimes you only get 50 minutes per lecture and it's really hard to digest and hard to learn. Teacher doesn't really tell you much. So like if you're ever worried about like, oh, I'm doing good in high school and then when I'm in college, I don't know if I have math requirements. What if I fail or if I don't get a good grade? I had seen the two like high level classes that I took in math, and then like no one ever questioned whether I would make a good developer.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever got more than a B in math in college. I think almost all my grades. Not saying that it's not great or whatever, but like it's math in college is definitely much different. But you don't need it to completely succeed, I guess. But if you love math, go for it. It's great. I don't understand it, but yeah, it's great.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was the one who was muted. All this time I was saying, Kyle, you're muted. But I was muted. I'm sorry, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really have anything to add. Like most of the math you'll be learning is mostly just going to be for like exams. When it comes to like actually coding, there are like a bunch of libraries that will do like the math for you. Like they will just do the heavy work. You'll just find like making like machine learning algorithm, like with all the math involved. It only really takes like a few lines of code using a library. So if you're actually coding, you don't really need that much math. But if you're like going into like CS, like I don't know, like master's degrees or like doctor's degrees, that's probably where the math will be more involved.
Yeah, so I want to like add a little bit on that. Like computer science is sort of like built upon your predecessors. Like we don't code in zeros and ones because people have already like built a library for us to use, and we no longer have to do like the rudimentary like reinventing the wheel sort of work. So the whole purpose of like doing a lot of these like very nitty gritty classes in college is simply so you can understand it and like know how the concept works. And then when you actually are working in the industry, you can kind of like, use the shortcuts and whatnot. So, how in school people are like, oh, you need to, know how to memorize these numbers and whatnot. And then when you're actually working at the actual job, you just use a calculator. So yeah, it's like they just want you to make sure that you know what you're doing, but you don't have to repeat the process again.
Absolutely, yeah. And I just graduated with a math CS major, and I realized I can completely cut out 50% of that major and just keep the other ones. But yeah, so what we have one more student question, and hopefully I'm understanding the context right. But what are some good things and bad things to look out for when accepting a offer in the industry? I'm guessing contract wise, pay wise, compensation. Any tips?
So is this just purely like talking about compensation, or is it also about things like, the specific position or maybe a certain team?
Yeah, I think it's very general. So an offer overall, what are some things that a person should look for?
Of course, compensation is important, but aside from the compensation, there's also a lot of other factors. I think one thing that's really important, it's really, really hard to gauge, unfortunately, because, most interviews are, done in a day, and you can only have, a few hours to speak with people who are interviewing you, or maybe if you're lucky, talking to the hiring manager or other people on the team. And you can kind of get a good feel of like, what sort of work environment the company is like setting, and whether you feel like you would belong there. Like I know some companies might have like a very like, laid back, chill environment, but sometimes it like some people feel like, oh, they're not like doing enough work. I don't feel like I'm like innovating anything. But at the same time, on the other side of the fence, you also have people who are like, oh, this is so much work. They're like doing like daily stand-ups, maybe even twice a day, and they're just like shipping things like every week. It's too much work. So I guess something that's really important is finding a good work-life balance, and this is something that heavily impacts people in the tech industry. Burnout is a real thing, and it happens even to like very young people, like people with 1 or 2 years of experience. Like they sometimes feel like this is too much. I can't do this for the rest of my life. So it's important that when you, I guess, like have an offer, you want to, I guess, ask about, what the culture is like, working culture, the team culture, as well as, I guess, like what do people do like outside of just, the work environment? Like, are people, friendly with each other outside of work? That's something that I find is pretty important. If your team is not like very close knit, it's harder to bond. And at the same time, if you just keep it like work related, then some people like get to the point where, it's like, I don't look forward to work. I just like go to work, do my work, and I just go back home, So it's sort of, you want to make sure that whatever you're doing, you enjoy it. And at the same time, you have other people that you can share the experience with.
Good advice for sure.
I agree with what Stanley said. And then just to kind of like add on to like, making sure you're in the right company with the right culture, just be authentically you. And then, if it's your concern that like you don't want to do like 2 stand-ups a day, like, check in during the morning and then like another check-in like at the end of the day to say what you've done, it can be really stressful and then it's really disruptive to your life and your work, obviously. So if that's something you want to ask, like please ask right away. And then most companies, they'll be very understanding because they want to know what kind of engineer you are, what kind of like, coworker you are within a team. So that's something, and that's really important to like always ask. If you have something on your mind, please ask. And then, thanks, Jose. And then if you say are worried about compensation, like, definitely ask about it upfront. And then I know in terms of like negotiating offers, things like that. Usually, or even this like earlier in the interview process, they might ask you like, oh, what's your expectation? Like, it's not legally allowed for you to like say something and then they like kind of like gauge. So like if they ask like, what's your expectation? Always ask back what they can offer. Like always do that. Don't just say a number. You might be lowballing them, and then like later on you get hired. Like, oh, actually, this is like not a lot. Like I wish I didn't just say that number. So always like do that as you're interviewing. And then always kind of be mindful of like interacting with whoever's hiring you, like take note of like how many people are like communicating with you as you are being scheduled with interviews. Like is it like one person on the phone with you to schedule things and prep you as a hiring manager, or is it like another person to schedule you? So if there's more than 2 people, it's a bigger company, it's a bigger team. And then later on in the interview process, when you meet the team, kind of just like see like how they are between each other and how they talk to you, things like that. And just kind of like get a general vibe of like how everything's going on. And then another thing be mindful of is like exploding offers. So offers that's like you only have like the next week to like decide if you want to take it or not. If you get that kind of offer, do not take it. Like it's a trap. Absolutely do not do that. Usually there's always some reason behind like why they want someone right away. So yeah, that's all the things I can think of right now. So maybe it's a lot, maybe it's pretty random, but hope that helps.
Yeah, all great points. And I would say for me specifically, like I in terms of like actually signing a piece of paper and a contract and like doing with that later, I had a problem with that. So when I was at Facebook, I didn't like what I was doing. Only a few months in, I was like, yeah, I definitely want out at some point soon. But some certain things in your contract might depend on like when you leave. So for example, like if there's a sign-on bonus or if there's stock options or if there's other things that are part of it, it might be contingent to you being on for a certain amount of time. So for example, I've had friends who are like, oh yeah, you only get the full sign-on bonus if you stay for an entire 2 years. Or for me, in my case, it was like 1 year for some of my things. And I didn't read the contract that closely sometimes. So like there was some things I did miss out on. So that was like, so, definitely make sure that you read your contracts and like know what's going on there. Just because like I know what kind of like, what kind of mess that could be. And it's like definitely not very fun at all. But I think in general, like it's very hard to compare when you don't really know what's going on. Like if you don't have other friends who are also interviewing at the same time, or people who are like a few years ahead of you who like are in their careers and done this before, it's very hard to gauge if a contract is like good or not, or if like the rate that you get is good or not. It just kind of comes with time and experience, which really sucks if you're like very early in your career and you don't know anyone, because then you don't really have anything to compare your offer to. So definitely like, when you're, if you do like get into this field, like, when you're in the classes you take, definitely try to make friends of like varying levels of like, either a few years ahead of you or at your stage, just so you have like offers to compare to, because like that's really key to like really knowing like your worth in this industry and like what your friends get. Like that's definitely like key in my mind. And I would say for me as a freelancer now that I have like a lot of clients, and like, it used to be for me, it was like I interviewed once and then I'd like work someplace. Then a couple years later, like a year or two later, I'd interview again. Now I'm like constantly interviewing in a way where like I talk to people and like they ask me like, oh, what's your rate? And I give them my rate and I sign contracts and all that. I do that way more often now than I did when I was like, a full-time person, like working like not as a freelancer. And I'd say like it's definitely an art, and it definitely takes time and patience to like really figure out, like after you do it a few times, you're like, okay, like this is when I should talk about my rate. This is when this is what I do. This is what I don't do. Here are things that I'm going to look out for in my specific contract. And unfortunately, it just takes time to like really kind of like know what's going on. It's really hard to like, give someone a list of like things to check, because whatever list you create up with is for your specific situation and not theirs. So it just kind of takes time, like experience of like interviewing and talking with people and trying things out to like see like what your worth is and like where you should be in this industry. But yeah, don't get locked in. And if you do sign something, know how soon you could get out of it without losing too much money, because that could just be a nightmare in itself.
Tons of great advice.
Yeah.
Kyle, how about you?
Yeah, I guess like I agree with like what everyone, especially Alex, is saying. Like kind of like read the contract before you kind of like accept it. Another thing is that you're not limited to just like the contract for your information. Like you could always look at the internet to see if other people who have taken like similar offers kind of like agree that it is a good job to take. Like yeah, sometimes in the internet, like only like the more like hot opinions or like hot takes are probably what shows up in like job reviews. But generally if you like look at like, I don't know, probably like Reddit, there's like a subreddit called CS Career Questions, I think.
Yes, I can highly recommend that.
And
Yeah.
there's the app called Blind, right, where like employees from like these like big tech companies talk about their life or compensation or things like that.
Yeah, so yeah, hit up those online resources and see if like this is the correct job for you. Yeah, and beware of those exploding offers as well.
I see.
And I guess something else that I might want to add is, if you are an intern, 99% of the time you will not be able to negotiate, so it's best not to try. But negotiating is mostly for, I guess, like when you start working like full time. And on top of that, usually for new grad positions, from what I've experienced, it's very rare for companies to be able to offer a lot of negotiating for new grad positions, but it's usually more like later on in your career when you're able to negotiate what you want. But in the event that you are able to negotiate, some important things to keep in mind is always be like nice about it. Like, don't be like, I want this amount now, or else, you know, I'm leaving. Like, if you do that, you're probably gonna be like, you know, like instantly turned off, or like, you know, the company's not gonna want to hire you because, you know, you don't want that sort of person on your team, right? And also, you want to have multiple offers if possible, because if you're just, you know, trying to negotiate with the one sole offer that you have, there's a good chance that, you know, if you like push too hard, they're gonna be like, sorry, we'll give it to someone else, you know. So it's important that you have the right balance between, you know, like what you want at the same time what the company expects.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you all for wow, a myriad of great advice. And we are closing in at the end of our panel. I just want to thank everyone who was able to join our panel. So Kyle, Alex, Stanley, and Harriet, I know you are all busy with work. You all don't have the pleasure of summer vacations anymore. So thank you all for making time for China Hacks and being here. Yeah, so we're currently recording this panel and we'll be uploading it soon after Zoom is done processing it. But thank you all for everyone who asked questions. It was a great collection of questions, and I hope everyone here had a very insightful time. Of course, Kay, did you have a question? Okay. So yeah,
I think that, yeah, that's the applause.
oh, applauding. Sorry, I thought it was raising hands. I'm like, yeah. So thank you all again for the participants and our panelists.
Thanks, Jose. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Stanley. And thank you, Kyle, for being here. Hey, everyone.
Okay, so I guess I'm gonna end this Zoom call now.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye.
See y'all.